Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Jay from Unfair Sports on, and a big shout out to Jay for joining me all the way from Sin City, from Las Vegas. Also, shout out to Jay for doing this after a tough one on Saturday that certainly did not go Oklahoma's way. We'll talk about that just a little bit. We'll certainly talk about South Carolina, which is a huge game for both teams, considering how seasons have started out. But Jay, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing all right, TJ. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's early morning here because I'm on Pacific time. But no, I appreciate you having me as usual.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this while you're working, but you're also in Vegas right now. So like I don't feel that bad for you jumping. Like you're still in Vegas while I'm in Tampa, Florida. And I like Tampa. But like come on, I don't feel that bad. So no, but all jokes aside, coming out of the Texas game, 4-2, not really where the Oklahoma standard of expectations are, but on the whole, if you step back and kind of consider what's happened this year, 2 top 10 losses, and I know that Oklahoma wants to be there and doesn't, it's a top 10 loss, it's okay. Not really, but some promise, some concern, I'm sure, from a very, very 30,000 foot view. Oklahoma, to me, as an outsider that doesn't, isn't really tied into the expectations of the program and the history there. It feels like the season's probably gone as well as it could, all things considered, at 4-2. And I also feel like they've got a chance going forward with maybe some more winnable games here coming up to at least make this a not disastrous season. I don't know. That's my outsider take. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Yeah, no, the problem for Oklahoma has been it's all self-inflicted wounds. Our offense has been atrocious for some very odd reason, while at the same time we're playing a true freshman and a true sophomore quarterback. Jackson Arnold just could not make mistakes, and he wouldn't pull the trigger to the point of you got to move on. And Michael Hawkins was doing really good in practice, so he earned his opportunity to go out there and try. And he looked solid, looked okay against Tennessee. He looked okay against Auburn. So you're like, okay, we're seeing week over week progression. If the offense can get halfway decent to match what the defense has been putting together, we should be good, right? Then the Texas game happened, and it felt like there was a massive regression going into that game in comparison to what we saw against even Auburn. Now, Texas is a solid football team. They're really good on defense. They're good on offense. They've got everything that they need. They're clicking on all cylinders. Honestly, they're clicking on all cylinders just like the 2018. So, yeah, hate to say it, but it sounds like they're putting themselves in a direction to go towards a national championship. They are clicking. Everything has lined up perfectly. So they're taking advantage of it. They're winning the games they're supposed to. And then Oklahoma's defense just did not show up the way it normally had. The first quarter was fantastic, TJ. I'm sitting at the sports book screaming, losing my mind. Like, look at that defense. Q1, 3-0 Oklahoma goes the best you could have ever imagined. And then the wheels fell off. And so, as you can see on my shirt, it's like Wednesday Addams, I hate everything right now. I just hate it all. That's all I can really feel at this moment is that pain.
So it's so hard, I think, when a team that's struggling plays a team that is maybe the best in the country. We'll find out more about them this week when, I kind of like the spot that Kirby is in as an underdog. Maybe Oklahoma fans will like to hear me say that, but because it just doesn't happen. And so I think that, I told somebody yesterday, the greatest con of all time was Kirby convincing his greatest team ever that they were a 7-5 team. It's man, nobody believed in us. Everybody doubted us. And I'm like, who doubted you? You were overwhelming. But anyway,
what's their name?
But I do think that that's a good spot for Georgia to be in, an underdog this weekend. But back to the last week, it's hard to glean a lot from a team that's struggling versus a team that's, for all intent and purposes, elite or really great. And so does that, big picture probably doesn't make you feel any better because you feel like, well, they're way up here and we're way down here. But does it make you feel like maybe we're not as bad as 34-3? Maybe that's what Texas is this year. Do you have hope? Just like, man, nobody else is going to beat us like that.
Yeah, I have a substantial amount of hope because I don't see anybody else on the schedule, honestly, as good as Texas has looked that we should be that concerned about. I think Ole Miss comes up the following week. We won't skip past this week, which is South Carolina, but more so looking at rankings. Ole Miss is ranked. Bama's ranked. Missouri kind of ranked. LSU ranked. We've seen all of them have really good games. We've also seen them have some really close nail biters to where it's like, okay, if we can just be competitive enough, we should be fine. I don't think any of those teams are clicking on the same cylinders that Texas is. So to me, yeah, I think that the outlook should still maintain the same. There's an opportunity to go on a winning streak. We just need the offense to have a pulse. If the offense, and literally it did not show a pulse last game, offense shows a pulse, we can be in every single one of those games. It's not a single one of them where we will see a blowout.
Yeah, I agree. And with how weird college football has been this year, nobody is unbeatable, but also everyone is a potential loss. Like that's what makes it tough. Is
yes.
you could. I mean, and that is. I mean, it's kind of like the NFL, right? Like you could win every week, you lose every week. But that doesn't usually happen in college football. It seemed like it's more of a thing this year, which is maybe good news in the games you thought you had no chance in, and it's maybe bad news in the games you thought were going to be just kind of easy wins. I didn't necessarily look at this South Carolina-Oklahoma game in the offseason and think that it would really be much trouble for Oklahoma. And I know South Carolina has some nice pieces, but certainly feels like a game that could go either way for sure this year. So before we talk about that, just you mentioned him a little bit, but overall thoughts on quarterback play. Again, is last week more indicative of Texas's defense, which is really good, great front seven this year. Do you expect him to kind of have a little bit of a bounce back, even though South Carolina has a great defense too?
Yeah, I think that this is the opportunity for the bounce back. I like what Michael Hawkins brings to the table. The one thing I would like him to do is just throw the ball. Sometimes you just got to get rid of that thing, throw it to, throw it across the middle, throw it at your wide receiver's feet, throw it to the running back, check down. I would like to see more check downs coming from him. And he has the capabilities. I mean, the game plan we brought in there in the Texas game, what bothered me is that we really tried to go into an option type setup, and Michael Hawkins is not an option quarterback. Michael Hawkins uses a very fast quarterback, and he can scramble very well. He's not an option quarterback. He plays so much better when he's in the pocket and he's just throwing out lasers across the field. I want him to do more checkdowns now. Be the checkdown king. Go out there and be Kirk Cousins. I'm totally here for that, right? Just dump that bad boy here and there. Boom, 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 boom. Go for 4 yards, 5 yards on a regular basis because that leads to bigger plays. And like you said, South Carolina has a really good defensive front. Their secondary and linebackers have been very suspect. So if as soon as Dylan Stewart comes your direction, throw it across from him. Hit that running back. Get rid of it. And at a certain point, they're going to have to start moving up, and then you can just lob that bad boy deep. You can put 2 guys on Dylan Stewart, stop him on the blitz, on his pursuit, give Michael just about 3 seconds, and he can throw that bad boy deep, in which we watched him do that against Auburn. That's going to be what's critical. It's getting rid of the ball, forcing the defense to play up, throw it over their head.
I think South Carolina is a little bit more boom or bust than Auburn offensively. They either do things really, really well or really, really poorly, I think. Defensively, I think they're kind of similar. Now, I think I like South Carolina's front better, but Auburn's pretty stout and has a good defense, a lot of good young depth. And so I do think that Oklahoma could have some success there. You got to go play, right? Like it's not just, you played well in one game, you're going to play well in another one. But, if I'm looking at this from the Oklahoma perspective, I am concerned about that front. I will like South Carolina's defensive line is what concerns me if I'm Oklahoma going into this because some of those guys you mentioned, Stewart and others that are just monsters. And, I'm already fearing the Kirby Smart tampering that's probably going to happen with Dylan Stewart later this year when, and the fact that Georgia's probably going to have him on their roster. That's, a joke for anybody that's listening. I have no inside info there. But, I worry about that front getting after Oklahoma. How healthy is Oklahoma up front? I know we've also talked about wide receivers and Oklahoma just trying to struggle through some stuff at those 2 positions. Where is OU right now on that front?
Health-wise on the offensive line, we're good. The line has gotten healthy. We've got all of we've had continuity for 3 straight weeks. That's probably the biggest thing that we've seen, right? We're not going back to multiple centers. So we're seeing continuity. The line is still young, but we're seeing continuity. And so they're getting better. They actually did pretty solid job of blocking in the pass in this last game. The biggest thing was, like I said, just throwing the ball. The wide receiver room, though, is a little bit more sticky. Brent Venables mentioned that Deion Burks, the transfer wide receiver from Purdue that we picked up, he wants to play. He's about 80%. The goal is he wants to get out there. And a lot of people are wondering, oh, he's probably sitting out because he doesn't want to play for a bad team. If he was sitting out, he wouldn't be on the team. That's not how this staff has ever worked. We've seen players get dismissed. He would be dismissed. He wants to play, and because he wants to prove himself and prove what not only this team can do, but what he can do is he's trying to prepare for the draft if he decides to go. So I can expect a Deion Burks potentially. No words on some of the other wide receivers like Jalil Farouk and Nick Anderson. They're both still week to week. It's going to take some time for them to continue to heal. But, yeah, it's been brutal losing your top 5 wide receivers and then having young quarterbacks that has got to figure out and make things up. It's at this point, they just got to go out there and be gamers and just, wing it. Hopefully something comes down the line for them.
Does the fan base somewhat forgive, football fans are not forgiving, but a little bit, not forgive, but like understand, like when you have that many injuries, like college football fans are psychotic people though. Like, I was talking to somebody in Nebraska this morning and they're 5-1 and they're all miserable. And I'm like, y'all ain't been 5-1 since, like a decade. Like, what are you miserable? Like, look at this team. Like they're 1-5. Like I would pay to have your 5-1 problems right now. So I don't know. Are they at least somewhat understanding of the struggles?
That's what it is. They're people want their teams to blow out everybody they play. They don't want close games. They want dominant performances at all time. They want 100% execution on every little thing that could possibly happen. And that's where fanatics are. That's where the fanatic portion comes from. Being a fan, they don't have a realistic expectations. There's going to be mistakes. Things aren't going to execute perfectly. Nobody's going to do things right every single time. And so, no, the fans are not forgiving just because of the traditions of Oklahoma. They expect for it to continue to roll on like it's supposed to. And for me, I'm understanding because I know that there's the context. That's the context behind the game. Yes, we brought in young recruits that are really, really good, top 100 guys. But that doesn't mean that they're going to walk on the field and immediately know the playbook and immediately know what to do in every single situation. Yeah. There's growing pains. And I had actually put out a video on my channel over on Unfair Sports when Michael Hawkins took the job. And I said, watch at your own risk. Because I basically told fans, look, you want a young quarterback and you want them to go out there and try to figure it out, be prepared for growing pains. And if you're prepared for growing pains, this team will be fine. But prepared, this team is going to have growing pains. It ain't as easy as you think. Take some time to get there.
Lornar Sellers makes some highlight type plays, makes some wild boneheaded type plays, just, kind of highest of highs, lowest of lows. But he is mobile. He does run fairly well, and Rocket Sanders runs the ball pretty well. And so they do have a pretty good running attack. Although Oklahoma's maybe built pretty well to defend an offense like this, especially with the playmakers they have on defense and just the physicality they play with on defense. And to me, even with if Sellers plays his absolute best, like his best game of the year, South Carolina's probably going to win the game. Like that's just how that works. If another quarterback plays an A game against you, it's hard to win. But if they get the running game going, that's a concern for me. But I do think that this could be a more traditional ground and pound, grinded out type game that maybe favors Oklahoma if it's a little lower scoring, just because of how good that defense truly is. And obviously, the offense has to give them a break at times and get some things going. But I do think the style that this game could be played at is maybe a little bit more of a benefit toward Oklahoma and what they need to do this weekend.
Yeah, Oklahoma's been a really good run defense besides the Texas game. They've been a really good run defense this season. Teams that typically run the ball like Tennessee, they could not get it established that they normally would. Oklahoma's only given up 100-yard rusher this season, and that was last week against Texas, in which, like I said, I felt like the defense just kind of laid down. It just wasn't working out the way they wanted. And so I do believe that if that's the game plan for South Carolina, Oklahoma's going to be in a really good position. They're solid on the run defense. Now, the other thing is going to be making sure that we don't give up big plays like to Nick Harbor, right? That dude is a monster. And as long as we can keep him kind of somewhat contained or bracketed, I think we'll be okay. So the big thing is going to be making sure the quarterback doesn't scramble all over you, keeping someone that kind of quote-unquote spies him, while at the same time making sure that you don't give up massive runs and just tackle. When we tackle good, we're a really good team. I think it's one problem Auburn had long term. They were able to get some deep passes, but they couldn't get a run game established, even with Jaquez Hunter, We just kept hitting them and we tackled well. And then we made it to where it was difficult for them throughout the game to be able to do all the big stuff they wanted to do. So I think the defense is starting to really shape up. The secondary is getting a lot better. And long term, the one thing for us against South Carolina is don't let them gas you with the run. And if we continue to buckle down on that, we'll be fine.
So when I look at this game, I do think it's big for both teams, and I think it's massive that Oklahoma gets to play this at home. I think going into Columbia and everything else they've got going, like all the stuff in South Carolina makes it tougher. I think it's big that it's at home, but you kind of look at what's ahead for both teams. And South Carolina, I think trying to make a bowl, right, is big for Beamer. And, at this point, I kind of think they will. They've got A&M next week, tough game. Vandy, surprisingly, tough game. Then they've got Missouri, which for some reason they've seemed to do really, really well in that. They're going to beat Wofford. And then Clemson, they could lose out minus Wofford, right? And so, you look at, well, where are your chances for a win? I think that Oklahoma would be one of them for them. Missouri, probably a chance. But they play a lot of ranked teams, too. And if Vandy keeps winning, they'll probably be ranked as well. And then I look at the other side, too. You guys have Ole Miss ranked that you talked about. You have Missouri, the same opponent that we talked about, South Carolina. You have Alabama. You have LSU, going to be a really tough one. Obviously, expect to beat Maine. But, I would expect that Oklahoma gets to a bowl, but I feel like the 8-4 kind of benchmark, or even maybe pulling your way up to 9-3 by getting an upset or two, would kind of be what would make Oklahoma fans feel a little bit better. But it to me, if you lose, whichever team loses this game, it becomes, man, are we going to hit anything that we wanted to hit this year? Like, obviously, both teams have an auto win against Wofford and Maine. But outside of that, you could win any game, you could lose any game with how college football has worked this year. And so, to me, this is one that I think both teams are looking at saying, hey, we got to win this one. Like, this is one we got to go get. Because if we don't, who knows what the heck happens the rest of the year.
Yeah, this is a mission-critical game for both teams. Period. The team that goes out there and executes and closes it out will probably put themselves on a good trajectory for the rest of the year. Oklahoma wins. That's 5 wins on the season, 5-2, which gets them about I think the mark was 5.5 for this year or something like that for Oklahoma, or 6.5. I think it's something in that range. It was kind of weird. Or it's actually 6.5. And so if Oklahoma pulls that win, they pull out, of course, the Maine win, which is expected. Now, heck, if you ask a Sooner fan, they'll tell you the Maine game ain't a win guarantee. We probably will lose that one, which is even more hilarious to me, but I digress. Then at that point, you just need to pull up one upset of 4 ranked teams from LSU, Bama, Missouri, Ole Miss. You pull that out on top of the South Carolina game, but you're 7 wins. It's kind of a solid season at the end of the day. That ends the season in a solid note, gets you into a bowl game, and helps you to be able to prepare what you want to do next year. You got a lot of talent coming in the last couple of classes. Now the first class that was brought in is now at the maturity level that you're really ready to play them like crazy. And you're starting to see some of those guys play now. But the goal is going to be now to continue to retool and try to get yourself to an elite echelon of football. Having a bowl-eligible season this year could be the big one.
Yeah. If you can get to 7, 8 would be phenomenal. If you can get to 7 or 8 wins playing like 7,000 ranked teams, I feel like, again, the fan base won't be thrilled with that. But, objectively, taking myself out of Oklahoma shoes or whatever, I think that's not bad. All things considered, playing the Friday, all the things that have gone into this year. So, Jay, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work? And then what do you think happens on Saturday?
Check us out, Unfair Sports, here on YouTube, as well as whatever podcasts are downloaded and listened to. Thanks for having me this weekend. I think the Sooners pull out a narrow win, probably by a field goal. I don't know if either team can score that well, but at the same time, I do think both teams should be able to make something happen. 21-17 is what I'm thinking.
Dude, I literally almost said 20-16. So, yeah, I think 21-17 is too pretty for these two teams. I said that to somebody else yesterday, too. Like, 21-17 just sounds too clean. So, give me a few more field goals in there. 20-16. I'm kind of right there with you, though. I think Oklahoma gets it done. 21-17 is too perfect of a football score for these teams, in my opinion. So, Jay, thanks for hanging out, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you having me.